Who's that coming down the track? It's a mean machine in red and black. Ain't nothing finer in the land. Them drunk obnoxious Georgia man. Go,
What's up, y'all? This is John and Caleb back for another episode of the Nothing Finer podcast. Tonight we are going over the extremely interesting week 2 that we just had in college football. But before we get to that, how have you been? What are you drinking?
I've been good. First, I want to say this past podcast that came out this past week, it wasn't the first time that I heard the new intro, but I didn't think to mention it last time, so I wanted to mention it this time. Love actually hearing y'all's familiar voices on it. That's really cool.
Appreciate
Love the way
that.
that was done. Yeah, I've been good. Been enjoying the week. I've got a little electrolyte drink here that I'm working on. We just got back from Charlotte, and I came back thirstier than a sorority girl at the dog walk, so I needed something to drink that was going to actually hydrate me. You might notice I'm wearing my Facts hat today in honor of a certain wannabe self-described journalist.
Little J journalist, if I remember correctly.
Yes. He actually, I was thinking about this earlier too. He actually gave birth to the Dogstradamus meme because I made a little joke video of him before SEC Media Days last year, of him asking Kirby a dumb question and Kirby basically blowing it off, and then it happened pretty much exactly that way.
Yes.
So that is where that began. But anyway, what about you? How you been?
Good. I made something for dinner that I have not had in what feels like legitimately a decade or more. I made myself some meatloaf with like some jalapenos and stuff in there. And I forgot how much I liked meatloaf. But then, you know, my wife, Kelsey, will be upset with me if I say this, so I'm going to do it anyways. She was using a mandolin in the kitchen. And,
I'm assuming the utensil and not a stringed instrument.
Correct. Yep. I just realized the hand motion thing I was doing is below the camera. She decided that she wanted to leave a piece of her thumb with the food.
Ooh.
Yep. So if you've never had to put a tourniquet on your wife's arm because her thumb wouldn't stop bleeding, good for you. I hope you never have to.
I have not had to put a tourniquet on. I have had to do some other similar first aid when kitchen accidents have happened.
So,
Nothing that serious though.
so when you go through military first aid training, everything's a tourniquet because contrary to what they teach you in first aid class, you can leave a tourniquet on for 12 hours. Whole point of it is just stop the bleeding.
Right.
So she was putting pressure on her thumb, and she's like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I was like, move your hand. And there was still a ton of blood there. I was like, I'm going to get the tourniquet.
Yeah.
I was like, we'll check it in 10 minutes. And she quit bleeding. So tourniquets are useful.
Good to know. Might need to keep some around the house.
I have a first aid kit with that sort of stuff in my work truck because I just know someday it's going to happen and I'm going to need it.
Nice. We have a first aid kit in each of our cars. There's just like a little Walmart thing that's got some like alcohol pads and band-aids. Like nothing, not the real deal. So it sounds like we need to invest in the real deal if we really want to.
Oh yeah, no,
stop.
I have things that I acquired from the army through the years in just in a pouch that sits in my passenger side door pocket because I'm like, even if I like stop at a car accident and help somebody, like I have the knowledge and the ability to help somebody. So keep it around.
Yeah, I believe that power gives you the responsibility should the opportunity arise. So
Right, but it's like so in my head because I don't like responsibility. Um, the way I use it is like there are certain licenses that I have for work that nobody but my boss knows I have for a reason.
yeah,
Because people know that they're going to expect things, and then I'm responsible for more. And to be fair, my boss is the owner of the company, so if he needs me to do it, I'll do it. But if other people know it, they're going to expect it. So I just fly under the radar.
Yeah, I understand that. I had to learn that lesson the hard way. The more they know you can do, the more that'll become an expectation. And next thing you know, you're doing four people's jobs. That's
Yeah.
not happening to me right this second, but it has. And yeah, stay in school, kids.
Or I mean, I make a lot of money to do what I do, but for example, I took a chunk out of my hand yesterday because I had to work on a Saturday in the rain. So, all right, you know who else put some work in on Saturday?
I believe them dogs put some work in on Saturday.
They put some damn work in. Georgia won this game 48-3 after the defense of almost entirely freshmen late in that fourth quarter gave up enough yards for Tennessee Tech to kick an emotional support field goal. And, I don't know how it came up in my algorithm to find the entire post-game press conference from the Tennessee Tech head coach, but I really like him outside of what he said earlier in the week. Um, but, he said something about this is going to give our guys the knowledge that we may not have done it against their first string guys or their second string guys, but there's nobody on our level of football that has what they have in the third string. So he's like, for our guys to see that we can drive down the field and we can get a field goal against their third string guys that are better than the rest of the competition we're going to play, that's going to make them feel more confident going into the next game.
See, that's a good positive message to take from that. And that's different to me than a few years ago when Kentucky was calling timeouts and going no huddle to try to get to be the first team to score twice on that
Yeah.
2021 defense. Because at that point, like allegedly, Kentucky is on somewhere of a similar playing field to Georgia at that point. And so, like, what they're doing there to just try to get some pity points at the end is sad. But in this case, I really like it because, like you said, this gives them a chance to prove they can go do something against probably, again, even with the third string, better competition than they're going to face at all the rest of this year and learn something from it. So kudos to him for taking that from that. Takes a lot to kind of to swallow back and look at that from that level. A lot of even the FCS coaches tend to not take these games too seriously. So I like hearing he's going to take something from it.
Yeah, and so I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he had talked. I mean, he had been an FBS like Division 1 head coach for years, and then I don't know what happened on why he left Old Dominion after 15 years, but he came back into coaching, and he said when we came into the game, our goal was to not get hurt. So that's why the quarterbacks were falling down before getting hit, and
Mm-hmm.
while watching the game, it was like, oh man, they've already quit. And it's like, man, they still have 10 more games to play.
Yeah.
Why are they going to be like, oh, Christian Miller, I can juke him? No, you
No, you
can't.
cannot. And these guys on this Georgia team, they don't care who you are. Their job is to hit
Inflict
people
pain.
as hard as they can. So
Yes.
yeah, I hold no blame for them whatsoever. If it was Alabama, I'd be calling them soft, but it's not Alabama. So
Yeah.
what are you gonna do?
Business trip. For them, it
Yep.
was a business trip. They knew how it was going to end, but they still went in and did what they did. So, while the title of the episode may be Successful Bird Hunt and the graphic is an X over their like logo's eyes, I get it. But at the end of the day, they got paid to come in here and be a scrimmage. They did that. And they took some things away from it that I think are going to help them later in the year. So, you know, all jokes aside, respect the team for what they did and how they did it in an intelligent way.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more there. Could not agree with you more.
Um, so things that I take away from this game because there's not a ton. We just talked about it. It's a paid scrimmage with another team. But I think my suspicions were correct with Oscar having been dealing with a lower leg injury before he went out of that game.
Mm-hmm.
Because watching the replay, he didn't really do a whole lot when he went out in that play, and he was struggling to walk and didn't go back in. So I think that it was a nagging thing coming from fall camp because he didn't really play a lot against Clemson, at least
Right.
in running routes. And then, during that game, just a little tweak and he's out for the rest of the game. So I don't want to be right about that. I would much rather be wrong and him come out with 120 yards next week. But at the same time, I would also rather him be healthy for Bama and Texas and Ole
Yeah.
Miss.
Yeah.
Um,
And we were obviously fine the rest of the game. Lawson Lucky, I thought, did a pretty remarkable job out
yes.
there. Not that he's just a fill in because he is tight end too, and we're still running a lot of 12. Um, but he played, I thought, a pretty phenomenal game, um, coming in not just in relief, but taking on his role he already had as well.
Yeah, another guy that I thought showed everything that I wanted to see, Trevor Etienne.
Yes.
Dude, dude is the real deal. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but while watching the game, he looked much quicker in Athens than he did in Gainesville.
Yeah. Got a question. Is averaging over 15 yards per carry good? Is that something you would consider a good stat line?
From an offensive perspective, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought he looked phenomenally. He looked more explosive in his cuts. He looked quicker getting, from the first to the second level of the defense. I think he looks like an all around better player than he did at Florida. Some of that may be the offensive line and, Prince, I'm going to try to pronounce his last name, Princely Uman Mielen. I think I did that okay. When he transferred to Ole Miss, said that if you were an athlete on the team, they told you to just go be an athlete. Like they didn't develop you at Florida under Billy Napier, and I said
Hmm.
didn't because it's pretty much foregone conclusion at this point.
Yeah. Although he did outperform Dan Mullen against Sanford this weekend, but well.
That's fair. It may have something to do with his defensive coordinator that looks like the Truffle Shuffle kid from the Goonies.
Oh, he is chunk. He's chunk.
Look at a side by side picture and tell me I'm wrong. That's the first thing I thought when I saw him on the sideline last year against Utah, and I can't unsee it.
Yeah, you're. Oh man, you're not wrong. I'm gonna have nightmares about that though.
Nightmares about Florida's defense. What?
Nightmares about Florida's defensive coordinator doing the truffle shuffle.
Oh, okay. That tracks. Um, but the defensive line, I think, is going to handle teams that don't hold up to the physicality of the elite level. Um, does that mean I think Alabama? Well, maybe Alabama. Does that mean I don't think Texas and Ole Miss can hold up to that physicality? No, I think they absolutely can. But outside of those two teams, I think this defensive line is going to put some hurting on pretty much everybody else.
Yeah, and I think we're learning, especially with the rest of college football, pretty much what we all knew to be true. Which there's really only three teams on the schedule. Not that other teams aren't good. There's really only three teams on the schedule that you could make the argument could stack up to Georgia physically and cause them a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of physicality, Ellis Robinson seems to be cornerback three. He played mostly in the second half and with the second string guys, but Tennessee Tech never even attempted a pass in his direction. And every time they ran the ball, he was getting double teamed. And when they got a run that got into the second level, one specific time the refs called a face mask on Georgia. Ellis Robinson, the guy blocking him had two hands on his face mask and was tilting his head down. Like, you are not going to be the one to make this play.
Yeah, and I thought he looked good. He got some playing time last week against Clemson too down the stretch. I think he got a PI call against him that I thought looked more like just contact that happens when a good corner and a good receiver are going at it. But can't really control what the refs call these days. I'm not gonna sit here whining about it. But yeah, I thought Ellis has looked really really good through two games so far. He's got a bright future ahead of him. He seems to be locking down pretty well whenever he can.
Yeah. And as a true freshman, between him and KJ Bolden, and then another guy we're going to talk about in a minute. You know what? We'll
Mm-hmm.
leave it for in a minute.
All right, I did. If you don't mind, I do want to talk about Carson Beck for just a minute.
Okay.
We didn't talk about him a whole lot on the preview podcast, and a lot of us, I don't want to say we've taken him for granted, but we figured we know what we're getting at this point. By the end of last season, we know he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, probably one of the first quarterbacks going in the draft. We know he's got this insane ability to process and read a defense immediately and know what to do with the ball. The one thing, there were a couple of things I guess he hadn't really shown us that we just kind of said, whatever, this is just who he is. He hadn't really shown us what he can do with his legs or, had made any attempt to get outside the pocket and make plays. and he hadn't really shown that he was super comfortable throwing the ball deep if he needed to or had the opportunity. Not saying he was never able to do those things. I'm just saying he hadn't shown it a whole lot, and we didn't really care because he was doing so well at the other things. But let me tell you, he was at some times in this game really slinging the ball around. Like that 50-yard bomb to Arian, I know he underthrew it just a touch, but a lot of people would underthrow Arian Smith because it's hard to tell just how fast he is. But he still got it right in the breadbasket where Arian could just walk it into the end zone from 2 yards out. He had a few throws that went further than like the 25 yards that were just right on the money, put players in position. And then the plays he made with his legs, not just to escape and run for first downs on 3rd and long or whatever, but just the way there were quite a few plays where he was escaping the pocket and get around making throws on the run. And I thought, wow, we haven't really seen that. And again, I understand the competition he was going up against, but if he is evolving like this, to where even those facets of the game that we had just kind of decided, okay, this is just who he is, we don't need to worry about it because he's already this good. If those are evolving, the folks better watch out because we might be moving into like really, really special territory with Carson Beck here.
Yeah, and one thing that I personally hope they add in is just an extra wrinkle for his game. I would love to see some read option concepts with him. Like, you know, and if you don't know what I'm saying by that, and I know you do, but listeners, if you don't know what I'm saying by that, quarterback gets the ball, fakes or hands the ball off after reading one defender normally on the edge of the side he's facing when he hands the ball off. And if the defender starts to key in on the run, he takes it and runs to the outside. And Carson's not going to do what Stetson did against Auburn in 2022 and go 73 yards to the house. If he does, I'm so happy I'm wrong. But that's not necessarily what you want out of that situation. If, say they pull some read option plays out against Bama, you want him to get 3 to 5 yards a few times and make that defender hesitate for a half second to give Trevor Etienne, Nate Frazier, Branson Robinson, Roderick probably will be back at that point, the extra half second to get further downfield and potentially break one big. So it's just adding that extra wrinkle that'll make the defender take a second guess, and those are the kind of things that can win you tight games.
Yeah, when that 2007 team for Georgia that was so special, I don't know if you remember this, but back in, I think, 2006 against Auburn is the game that comes to mind. Matt Stafford was playing. Georgia was unranked at this point. Auburn was number 5. And Stafford was just having a field day with quarterback draws, of all things. Like, you don't think of him as the guy to blow you up with his legs. But, there'd be, 3rd down and 6. He would drop back and just cut up the middle. And, holes would be wide open for him because they weren't expecting that. And once they folks started saying, okay, he's not Cam Newton, but, well, I guess who would that be at that time? I don't know. Vince Young. He's not Vince Young, but he can hurt you if you're not looking for him. But then that opened things so much for Noshawn Marino, or it enabled receivers to kind of get open because somebody had to make sure he wasn't taken off, and it just opened the offense up so much more. And I think that's sort of what Carson Beck's legs can bring to this. He's not going to burn you for an 80-yard touchdown. Again, if he does, great. But he could make a defense slip just enough thinking, oh, I got to make sure this guy isn't going to burn us for a first down here, that it opens something up for an ETN or for something over the middle to be wide open. So I couldn't agree with you more there.
Yeah. Are you ready to get into the awards we're giving out this week?
Absolutely, positively. I will never say that again.
All right. For the...
Walker went 16 yards. He drove right over Orange Church, just driving and running with those big guys. My God,
for a second there.
Do what?
Did I lose you for a second?
No, the soundboard doesn't come through on your.
Oh, I forgot you got sounds for all these. Yes, Larry Munson. I'm sorry for interrupting Larry Munson.
Well, you wouldn't have if the soundboard didn't work for a second and I hadn't hit the button again.
Gotcha.
So, but the My God, a Freshman Award this week goes out to Kyron Jones. And he showed a lot to me as a redshirt freshman. He isn't getting the start at safety like KJ Bolden, but he played like he was next in line for that spot. If an injury happens, one of the starters, he's that next guy. His tackling is on an upperclassman level. He played extremely well in run support, and every single hit he laid down on somebody was heard on the broadcast. And he finished the day with 3 tackles, 2 solo, and I want to say he only played 1 quarter.
Yeah, dude is good. I didn't realize he redshirted last year. He got some playing time in the UT Martin game last year. Got a pick six right there at the end of the game. And I remember looking at him and being like, "This dude came to play tonight, and he's letting people know who he is." And he did the same thing here. He's been making the most of his opportunities. I felt like I was seeing 31 all over the field when he was in. I don't know if he was playing that star nickel position that always just seems to be everywhere when Georgia's got it. But if he did, he was excelling at it with those guys on the field. So props to Kyron Jones. We're going to be hearing a lot more from him in the future.
Yeah, one thing that during the game I was thinking about it because as soon as he started making plays, I was like, wait, who's 31? I don't remember that. And I looked it up, and it's like, is it going to suck when Malachi Starks goes off to the NFL this year? Yes. Is it going to suck when Dan Jackson is out of eligibility and potentially goes on to the NFL this year? Yes. But we saw in this game the guys that are just behind them, nipping on their heels, pushing them to be better every day at practice, are just as good as they are.
Yeah, we're going to be just fine.
For the offensive player of the week, we're going with Arian Smith. And what most people would say, Arian, against what most people would say, Arian Smith is getting our Offensive Player of the Week award over Carson Beck.
Yeah.
He had 4 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown. And the biggest reason that I'm giving it to Arian Smith is because if Carson had been a tick more accurate on 2 throws, Arian had 120 yards and probably 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And for a guy that for years we've been like, man, I wish his hands were a little bit better, and we're finally seeing it. We're finally seeing just what Arian Smith can be. And Arian Smith is one of only 2 players in UGA history to score points across 5 different seasons. The other was Rantavius Wooten from 2009 to 2013.
Yeah, big fan of Rantavius Wooten. That's some good shoes to fill. Arian will almost certainly go down in Georgia history as more memorable than Rantavius Wooten did. No disrespect to Wooten, but we heard some murmurs in fall camp that Arian Smith was really becoming a go-to guy for Carson, that he was really working on his possession catching, and we were sitting there thinking like, man, if that's really what's going on, and Arian Smith is really becoming a reliable pass catcher and not just kind of the track star we'd associated him with, that he could be phenomenal, and he could earn himself a lot of money this season if he keeps playing like he has been, because he showed every single ounce of that through these first 2 games. I think I saw he's got more catches, or as many catches at least, in his first 2 games than he did all last season, which is pretty impressive, and just goes to show you how much of a leadership role he has taken on this offense and how much he's dedicated himself to improving his game.
Speaking of leadership, and we're going slightly off track here. We're on the same train, but we're in a different car. Leadership. Trevor Etienne so Nate Frazier, when he had that little bit of a tweak in his leg or something and came off the field, immediately, as soon as he got off the table, making sure everything was okay, Trevor Etienne brought a tablet over, took him to the side, put his arm around him, and said, "Hey, on this last play, make sure you're looking here and here." And for a guy that's only been on the team for 1 off season, taking that leadership role because he knows how good he can be, love that.
Yeah, that's a big part of why he was brought to the team. From what I remember, Kirby Smart talking about that experience and that leadership, I think is going to do wonders for guys like Nate and even Branson too, who's been on this team for a while, but unfortunately hadn't seen a whole lot of the field due to injuries and stuff. I do want to shout out Branson Robinson real quick for just putting a couple of guys in the dirt this week and doing the things that we knew he could, but I guess I don't know if he was just timid about it last week, or I mean, Clemson's got a really good defense too. But he was running through people and being the Branson Robinson we remember from 2022 a little bit this week, and I was excited to see it.
Yes. We've got to come up with a nickname for him. We got Freight Train for Roderick.
Yeah.
we need something with how he just runs through people. I really want to use something about bowling ball because bowling ball Branson, but that's too
Oh,
much. That's too
yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah. We'll get something there.
Defensive player of the week. I wrote something. We were going against it, so this is all going to be off the top of my head. If it sounds stupid, okay. Um, we got Tyrion Ingram Dawkins as our
Mhm.
defensive player of the week. He had 4 total tackles, 3 solo tackles, and 3 tackles for loss, leading the team in that category. For a guy that is a junior now, last year he was in the two deep, but didn't play near as much as some of the other guys. Coming into his own in this year, and I don't obviously I haven't talked to the guy, I haven't talked to the coaching staff, but he seems faster this year, and he also looks like he's slimmed down just a little bit this year. He's still got that power. You're not moving him off the line, but he's able to shed blocks just that much better this year, putting guys in the dirt, putting linemen on skates. And, you know, that's something that we really, really need to see from this defensive line, considering the teams that Georgia has on the schedule this year.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree with the pick. I'd been thinking about how last year we always talked about how we just the defense and the defensive line, they were good, but we didn't really have a whole lot of that collapsing the pocket and making the quarterback feel like he had to do something right now. We saw a lot of that last week, saw a lot of that this week, and Ingram Dawkins was a big part of that. Um, I do also want to shout out, guys. Raylan Wilson in particular has been a monster getting to the backfield and causing issues as well. About half the time when I watched their quarterback fall down, it was because Raylan Wilson was screaming in his face, ready to make a hit. Um, he has been through both of these first 2 games been all over the place. I think he was kind of overlooked because CJ Allen was looking so promising, and over CJ Allen, he's doing some good stuff too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, led the team
Uh,
in tackles yesterday. He was top 3 against Clemson.
oh yeah, yeah. So he's he's doing some good stuff too with these two. And no disrespect to JDJ, but it's looking a little more and more like there was a reason he needed to go somewhere else where it looks like he would get more play than he probably would still get at Georgia because these guys have just taken over. With them and Smile, we've got an embarrassment of riches at the
Yes.
linebacker position. Kind of gives me, I don't like call me crazy, but earlier today I was watching the highlights of this game again, and I was sitting there like, man, I wish I was seeing more defensive highlights. I really want to watch this defense work. Have not really felt that way in about 3 years now with a
Mm-hmm.
certain very special defense. Not
Mm-hmm.
saying they're the same yet. Talk to me after the Alabama game, but they're very good, very fun to watch, very exciting to watch.
Yeah. No, so just something I was thinking about while you were talking there. Clemson gave up more sacks than Tennessee Tech, so does Tennessee Tech have a better offensive line?
That's a good question. Good. Is the quarterback falling over counting in the sacks category? I'm assuming it is.
It does not.
It does not. Okay.
But on the stat sheet, Clemson gave up more sacks.
Yeah. You know what? If Clemson fans start trying to talk again, we can certainly use that.
Well, they can talk to me because I put money on App State to cover 18.5 point spread, and they absolutely positively did not do anything
Yeah.
close to that.
Yeah. They were out for revenge. They were imagining G's on those helmets.
All right, so this week's Lumberjack Award goes to the entire offensive line room. I don't know the exact number, but by my estimation, 14 to 16 different players played on the offensive line Saturday against Tennessee Tech and only allowed 3 quarterback hurries and no true sacks. And I say true sacks because Carson was knocked down behind the line of scrimmage a couple of times when he took off and ran. To me, at that point, you're a
That's
runner, not
just
the
yeah.
quarterback. That's
Yeah.
not a sack. But
Yeah.
the entire offensive line room showed why Georgia is the favorite to win the Joe Moore Award this year. Every single one of those dudes was nasty. Georgia's tried 3 different guys at center.
Yeah. And all of them have been fine.
Right.
Yeah, which is amazing because you hear all the time about the connection between the quarterback and the center mattering so much. You see when centers get injured and the backups have to go in, that's when the bad snaps and fumbles happen.
It
We're
looks
not
like
getting that
Alabama's
here.
starting center last year most of the time.
Yeah, no kidding. So to have that and have that depth and have that depth of the connection with the quarterback is a blessing. We had a couple of different guys coming in at right tackle. I think it was gosh, I can't even think of the kid's name now, but we were getting a full on rotation in there most of the game, subbing guys out, and it felt like there was no drop in the quality of blocking we were getting that really at any point. I mean, this line, especially with the depth that it has, can make itself stay healthy through those rotations and is shaping up to be a monster. And that's bad news for anybody whose job it is to cover these receivers and keep Carson Beck from getting the ball to them.
Yeah, and one thing that I thought was important with the rotation in the offensive line is that they were still rotating. They rotated everybody but the center, even when Carson was in there still swinging the ball, and then they rotated the center on the last drive or two when Carson was still in the game. So Carson has had at least the two deep all play offensive line for him, and these type of games are going to get him comfortable with all of those guys.
Yeah.
Moving on to a game where the home team was not comfortable. Texas at Michigan. Texas won this game 31-12, covering and hitting the over. I said this game was going to be a blowout, and boy, was I not surprised.
Boy, am I glad I didn't change my mind on that pick, even though a part of me wanted to. Ooh.
Yeah, that was rough, pretty much from the rip.
Yeah.
Michigan was held without a touchdown until after the final 2-minute timeout. Minute 54 left in the game. Michigan gets a touchdown, and I guess they thought they could mount a comeback in a minute 54 because they went for two and didn't get it.
I think I call that a Kentucky touchdown. That's what that was. That was just let's not make this look as bad as it is.
And it immediately looked worse when they didn't get the 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
Michigan was able to move the ball for the most part. They had 286 total yards. They just turned the ball over 3 times, and when they did cross the 50, they couldn't really finish drives when it mattered. And Michigan, even when Fox keeps talking about how they have the best defensive line in the country, could not stop the run, allowing 143 rushing yards when Texas was without 2 of their top 3 options at running back. 143 yards against the best defensive line in the country.
Mm-hmm.
143 yards without 2 of their top 3.
Yeah, I noticed Fox, even when the game was getting out of hand, was just continuing to praise Michigan, act like, well, this isn't characteristic of them. They're still gonna, be a favorite to win the Big Ten. Oh, I don't even remember what exactly they said, but they're trying so hard to not make it sound like Michigan's falling off the map.
Yeah, and one of the best memes to come out of the weekend was from The Dark Knight Rises when Bane is taking down the plane, and he says, "No parachute for you, brother. They expect to find someone in the wreckage." And it was Jim Harbaugh with the mask talking to Sharon Moore.
Yeah. Again, the lack of contracts just makes that.
Oh, no. Sharon Moore signed a contract after the game yesterday.
After the game.
After the game.
They were like, you know what? Fine. Here you go. After that performance.
Well, the news came out and they had to get something together real quick.
Yeah. Harmful news coming out and them having to find a way to clean it up quickly is kind of Michigan's thing the last couple of years.
Michigan men. Yep. What can you say? So question for this game. How much of this game was Texas being that good and how much was Michigan just being completely depleted?
Yeah, that's Texas is definitely good. I mean, Texas is definitely the real deal. They're a force to be reckoned with. I'm sure they'll jump up to number 2 in the AP poll this week. I haven't seen it if it's already come out. They did. Okay, yeah, no surprise there. So I mean, they're good. They are that good, but you cannot deny, when you lose most of your offensive starters, I think a lot of your defensive starters. I don't know exactly how many. I don't have the numbers in front of me. You lose your head coach. Your staff kind of gets taken to the woodshed. You're not going to come back the same as you were a year ago. Not even particularly close. So a little good bit of both, to be honest with you. We are going to find out more about Texas as they go through the SEC gauntlet coming up. But again, with Michigan being as depleted as they are, you can't really deny Texas is looking really good.
No, 100%. And Texas doesn't really even start to have a schedule until the Red River rivalry on October 12th.
Yeah.
They've got
Which
UTSA, Louisiana Monroe, and Mississippi State.
Gotcha. Yeah, they got the Red River rivalry, and then they got to turn around and play Georgia.
7 days later.
Yeah, that's rough, but that's you get it to the slow start, and it's got a crescendo somewhere, I guess.
Arkansas at Oklahoma State. So Oklahoma State won this game in double overtime. Arkansas covered and the overhit. But Arkansas's defense showed me that they're for real.
Yeah.
They allowed 59 total rushing yards on. I wrote that number wrong for sure. They allowed 59 total rushing yards and held Ollie Gordon to 49 total yards, and only 34 of those were in regulation. Literally, the last two plays of the game, he got the next 15 yards.
Yeah, they did exactly what we said they would try to do, which is try to make Alan Bowman take over the game by stopping Ollie Gordon, and they did it pretty effectively.
Yes. And Alan Bowman specifically showed me that he has not progressed through his almost decade of college football or matured as a person, because into the fourth quarter, they were driving, trying to get something going. He hits a big pass, and as he's running down the field, shoots finger guns at the Arkansas coaching staff, and then gets a 15-yard penalty from where they just were.
A quick question: is Alan Bowman a transfer quarterback from Florida by chance? Because this just has Florida written all over.
So I don't think he's from Florida, but he has been to two other schools. And he spells his name wrong, so just all around not good. Let's see. Texas Tech, 18, 19, 20. Michigan, 21 and 22. And then Oklahoma State the last two seasons.
Gotcha. Michigan's where the dirty comes from, I guess, then.
Yep. Arkansas showed that they're for real in general. I don't think they're necessarily on the level of competing for an SEC title. But Taylon Green, Oklahoma State's defense was one of the best in the Big 12 last year. And Taylon Green went 26-45 for 416 yards, a touchdown, and interception. Anytime you see a 4 in the front of a 3-digit number when it comes to passing,
it's good.
Yeah.
It's real good.
And then he added 18 carries for 61 yards on the ground. His running mate in the backfield, Jaquindon Jackson, I think is a top-tier running back in the SEC. Once all the injuries started happening to different running backs throughout the SEC, a lot of people were wondering who's going to lead the SEC in rushing. I think Jaquindon Jackson's got something to say about
that.
Yeah. He's got 24 carries, 149 yards, and 3 touchdowns, and added 2 catches for 21 yards on top of that.
Yeah, which is really impressive, and it fits right in with that Arkansas DNA that they've always brought really good running backs in to run it down people's throats. One of them just transferred to South Carolina last year. I'm sure we'll talk about them, but this is the way Arkansas wants to beat you. I know this is the way Sam Pittman wants to beat you. Again, they threw for 400 yards, and we're talking about how dominant the running back game was. It just shows you how great this offense was throughout the whole game.
Yeah, no, I'm excited, and the entire front seven for Arkansas surprised me with how well they played, especially former dog Xavier Sori. He had 13 tackles, 7 solo, 2 tackles for loss. Their discipline's got to get better.
Yeah.
Xavier Sori, I can count 2 times towards the end of the game he had a tackle for loss and turned around and got a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty and gave them a first down when he just stopped him on third.
Yeah.
That's got to get better going forward. And he also had an offsides call late in the game. Just the discipline.
Yeah.
Without those yards, Oklahoma State doesn't kick the field goal to go ahead.
Yeah.
Specifically, an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty and offside penalty. Both of those were third down calls. Both of those, if they had not done it, it would have been fourth and long. And Oklahoma State doesn't kick that field goal at towards the end of the game.
Yeah. And that disappoints me because and in general, and I don't want to dog on Arkansas too much. I was very impressed with what they did. But I was pretty disappointed that with that and the gift in overtime,
Mm-hmm.
when they kicked that when they missed that field goal in overtime, my nephew texted me. He's like, "Well, Arkansas choked," and yeah, I flipped the game to something else because I'm like, Oklahoma State's going to kick the field goal. We're done. A few minutes later, I check in and see the game still happening.
Yeah.
So they were gifted another opportunity. Still couldn't capitalize on it, unfortunately. But again, I don't want to dog on it too much because they hung in there. This is probably the football team called the Cowboys with the best chance of winning some kind of championship this year.
Facts.
So to really stand in there and hold your own against them, considering where the expectations were for this season, especially, I tip my hat to Sam Pittman and to Arkansas there.
I mean, 3 weeks ago, everyone was talking about Sam Pittman as a dead man walking, and now everybody's
Mhm.
asking what bowl game he's going to.
Yeah, yeah, in a game that he lost, but it was
Exactly.
at but lost so admirably you can't ignore it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Oklahoma State is a team that attempts to spoil seasons. I mean, going back the year Caleb Williams was at Oklahoma,
hmm
they were about Oklahoma
They
won the
could.
Big 12 that year. They lost to Oklahoma State the week before, and that's what kept them out of the playoff.
Yeah, that was the second loss that season, right?
It was.
Win that game, and you were almost definitely in the playoff for them.
Yeah. And
Which would have
what
made some interesting questions happen with regard to Alabama. But
well, that was the year Georgia got in as a 3 seed after losing
oh, you're
Alabama.
right. You're right. Sorry, I had that backwards. But yeah, yeah, I blocked that SEC championship game out of my memory. But so that would have had some interesting questions in terms of Cincinnati. Then if they could have gotten spurned 2 years in a row, if Oklahoma had won that game. So what could have been?
Yeah. And there's one play from that game in specific that I think about way too much for me to never had a dog in that fight. Into the game, Oklahoma's going for it on fourth down, and the edge rusher that Oklahoma State had at the time getting knocked down by the tackle and essentially bear crawling to Caleb Williams for the sack is I think about it way too often.
Man, that is toughness right there, and that is also the most Caleb Williams way to lose a game I've ever heard in my life.
Well, he didn't lose today. I mean, did you
That's
hear
true.
he had 93 yards passing and still got 5 post-game interviews?
Yeah, I mean, bravo. That's a stat line that Jackson Muschamp would be proud to have in the NFL. So good on you.
Oh, all right. A game that was disappointing at the end, but we
Yep.
were all happy for 45 minutes. USF at Alabama, and Alabama ran away with this one late, winning 42-16.
It was not that dominant though. This is one of those games where the final score does not reflect in
No,
any way the closest of the game. It was a 1 point game with 6 minutes left.
right. And they scored 28 points in those 6 minutes because
Yeah.
USF had to start going for every fourth down, trying to get down the field.
And Kalen DeBoer wanted to make the game look better than it was.
Right. That was 100% optics fourth quarter
Yeah.
because at the point that you could have run the clock out and shaking hands at the 50 and gone home, it was at 20 something 16,
Yeah.
and that's like, okay, hard fought game. No, Kalen DeBoer had the starters out there running plays with a minute and a half left.
Yeah. I was just sitting there praying somebody would Mario Cristobal them. That's all I
So
wanted.
much.
But
So much.
wasn't meant to be. Alabama is a more talented team, so they had a better chance of doing that if they wanted to. But they really never should have done that to begin with. And I again, I know they wanted the final score to look better, and it was a tight game, and they were upset about that. But You really could have thrown that game away. I know you didn't, but you really could have.
Wish they would have.
Yeah, no kidding. You and most of the rest of the country.
And they really did try. Alabama struggled on both sides of the line of scrimmage. They allowed 206 yards rushing on the defensive side of the ball. On the offensive side of the ball, they allowed 3 sacks by the Bulls defense and gave up 3 fumbles, including one when they were about to punch it into the end zone. New center, same snaps. Getting the ball to the quarterback is actually most of your job.
Yeah.
And Alabama, with all their 5 stars, finds a way to not do it well.
Mm-hmm.
USF held. Go ahead.
Oh, you go. You say this first. I have a response to this next bullet point you have written down here.
All right, so USF held Jalen Milroe to 12 carries for 2 yards. Going into the fourth quarter, that was actually 12 carries for -6 yards. He did get 2 rushing touchdowns, but the lack of yards came from running backwards and getting sacked.
Which, not to look ahead too far, but that is some delicious film for Kirby Smart.
Yep. I guarantee
especially the way he thinks. Yeah.
I guarantee you this morning he called Jalen Walker and Michael and CJ and those boys, like the guys that really get after the quarterback. He called them into the film room and just had it cut up of every time Jalen Milroe ran backwards. He was just like, you see this? You see this? That's your job.
Yep. Especially because he's sitting there like, okay, this is what they did wrong. And if Kalen's a good coach, this is how he's going to try to correct it. And if he does, this is what you're going to do. Because he's playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers. But enough about Kirby. We're talking about Alabama's foibles right now.
And, the same offensive line that somehow the media has waxed poetic about being much improved, even going back to last year, which I will not go on the same tirade that I did after that SEC championship, but they essentially had a 7-man line of scrimmage for that entire game because the offensive line was still dog shit. But anyways, that same offensive line that everybody said is so much better had 13 penalties for 120 yards, including about 5 on their right tackle, Ryan Bamford.
Yeah, if Nick Saban were still the head coach after the third one, he probably loses his scholarship.
But if Nick Saban was still the head coach, you could see after every single one of those penalties, they zoomed in on Saban and his face just got more red every time, which hilarious. And now that he's not the Alabama head coach, I love his media personality. I think he's hilarious. But he would have been running sprints on the sideline after the third penalty. He would have been like, you're not playing the rest of the game. You're going to do sprints, and every time your backup messes up, I'm going to remind you that should have been you. But softer kind of football.
Yeah, that's the Pac-12.
Alabama did really struggle in this game until USF had to go forward on 4th downs. To be just completely honest here, USF's 4th down calls might have been some of the worst play calls they had through the entire game. On 4th down, their play call was inside read option, and it was quarterback either hand the ball off to a halfback dive on a 4th and 4, or take it and do a quarterback dive on 4th and 4. There was
against
no
Alabama,
yeah,
who still has bigger guys than you on that defensive line.
Yep. Instead of like, hey, let's run to the outside, or maybe like between the guard and the tackle, they're like, no, dude, our center is going to give us 4 yards. They didn't.
Yeah. Who needs to find space in the flat against the biggest defensive line we're going to face all year?
Yep, and that's actually saying something a lot to me, because Alex Golesh was he was the offensive coordinator under Josh Heupel for the 2022 Hendon Hooker season. So he knows what to do. That tells me he had the confidence in his guys against this Alabama team.
May have been a bit misplaced.
Correct. Confidence is a double-edged sword when it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Um, question for this game. With the struggles Alabama had on their offensive line, does that change your thinking about how their next two games could go with them playing at Wisconsin and Georgia at home in 2 weeks?
So I'm not going to say anything in terms of predicting this Georgia game until it happens
And
because
then
I
you're
have
gonna
been
do it through
burned
gritted
before.
teeth like I do.
Yeah, because I know Nick Saban is not there anymore, but until we prove that it's not the same, I'm just gonna let whatever happens happen there. But I will say, I tried to find some excuses for Alabama with this game, so I could believe they are as good as they have been, and just slipped up last year when they played USF close. They had it was at USF's place. They didn't really know who their quarterback was gonna be. They were experimenting a lot with the offense.
They had a lacrosse player
Understandable.
trying to play quarterback.
Yeah, understandable that it kind of stayed as close as it did in that game. They don't have any of that this time.
Nope.
They got a first year coach out of the Pac 12, but that first year coach just went to the national championship game last year. You'd think
With
that's
less
not going to,
talented team.
yeah. So you would think that's not going to drag them down in this too much. They just, Jalen Milrow looked like the Jalen Milrow halfway through last season, where he wasn't super confident in what he was doing. He was not making the best decision for the offense and the team. And up until the last minute and a half of the game,
In all
at
of their long
least.
play, two of the three touchdowns they got late were long runs.
Yeah. And it was the 17-year-old kid, right?
No,
That,
one was Jam Miller, one was Justin Haynes, the
oh,
trader.
oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then one was a pass where Jalen Milrow underthrew the kid by about 10 yards and he was fast enough to make up for it and make a couple guys miss.
Yeah. So not a great day from Jalen. If he is still this inconsistent like he was last year, that says something good to me for this Georgia game. Again, I won't say too much. They'll probably be fine against Wisconsin. It is a road game, and I'm sure Wisconsin's going to come for blood in that game. But I'm sure they'll be completely fine. Go into the bye week with the win. People praising them once again. But the way they come out against Georgia is going to say a lot about Kalen as a coach bouncing back from this game. Is he going to make corrections, or is he going to look at that fourth quarter and say, "Oh, we're fine"?
Yeah. And I'm assuming it's mostly Georgia fans listening to this. We want Alabama to win next week.
Mm-hmm.
You do not want Alabama loss bye week, then playing in their house.
Yeah.
Would
As
I?
funny as it would be to watch Wisconsin sneak out of there with a win, what I want is for Alabama to win 59-3 and just have their heads through the ceiling going into this game against Georgia. I want all of the meat. I want them to pass Georgia for the number one ranking after this game is what I want. Just stick everything on the bulletin board that we can.
Yeah, the worst thing that could happen for Georgia is Alabama losing next week. But I would be lying if I didn't say that I would laugh so hard that my sides hurt.
Yeah. The one thing that would give me solace if Alabama does lose the game next week, other than how funny it is that Kalen DeBoer is not Nick Saban. And so is he going to be able to channel that and make those corrections? Time will tell.
Yeah. So we do have some random quick notes from games, stuff that we didn't think was necessarily enough to break down the whole game, but we wanted to talk about. First one on the list, I would be surprised if y'all were not surprised that we haven't talked about it yet. Notre Dame showed just how bad they are on offense and how little trust they have in Riley Leonard when they attempted a 62-yard field goal instead of throwing a Hail Mary, and the plays leading up to that were quarterback draws instead of passes because they did not trust the guy that they got from Duke.
Yeah, this is seems to be a running theme, excuse me, with Marcus Freeman. He does not want to put the ball in the air and take a chance for whatever reason. He would rather do what he did, which is run the ball till you can get a 62-yard field goal and hope for the best, than take a chance on a turnover or something like that. I'm not really sure why, although in fairness, you probably should have played a better game up until that point. It's Northern Illinois. Why did they have the lead? But this nothing really new, and I hate it for Marcus Freeman because I like him as a person.
I do too.
But again, we talked about the inconsistency with Jalen Milroe. There's a lot of inconsistency with Marcus Freeman and this Notre Dame team over the years. It seems like one week they're really overperforming and looking like a playoff lock, and the next week they're completely shooting themselves in the foot.
Losing to Marshall or Northern Illinois.
Yep, yep. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
How funny is it that Northern Illinois scored more points than Texas A&M?
Hadn't thought of that either. That's probably exactly how they won. This offense for Notre Dame just seems anemic at times. I mean, O'Reilly Leonard's good.
I was doubting him coming into the season. He has not shown me that he can win a game with his arm.
That's fair.
Going to a team that actually did win a game with their arm that shocked everybody. Did Penn State just overlook Bowling Green, or do you think that's who their team is without them being a ball control, run heavy team this year?
That's hard to say. It's a question I meant to ask about the Alabama game too. Bowling Green has surprised a couple of Power 5, Power 4 teams over the last couple of years. Was it Georgia Tech they blew out a couple of years ago?
And I get they beat Georgia Tech by 2 possessions last year.
Yeah. And so again, I mean, I know it's Georgia Tech, but that was a pretty good Georgia Tech team. We didn't beat them by 2 possessions. So something to think about. Sometimes these teams just step up. USF might be Alabama's Missouri. Bowling Green might be a Missouri that just shows up and plays once in a while and tries to get you. So it's hard to say. I'm not making a decision on Penn State right now. I like following your number 15 rule with them right now because they looked pretty good against West Virginia. But again, the consistency really needs to be there. And we'll see if that develops over the course of the season. But so far, obviously, it's not there yet.
I actually bumped them up to 12 last week in my ranking. And then they immediately went back to 15. I was like, yeah, I was too soon. It's too soon. I might have a soft spot for West Virginia, but nope, can't do it. Back to 15.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech could not stop a Syracuse team with a dynamic offense, allowing Kyle McCord to go 32 of 46 for 381 yards and 4 touchdowns, and allowing 137 combined yards rushing. I think they'll do well with most of the ACC, but that really just tells me how bad Florida State is.
Yeah.
And, we've said it thousands of times at this point on the show. But also, Kyle McCord was not the issue at Ohio State last year. It was the offensive coordinator and lack of talent outside of Emeka Egbuka. I hope I said his name right, because
I think that's right.
Okay. I was about to say, one of the few Ohio State players that I really, really like. And then last year they had Marvin Harrison Jr. Like that. Yeah. Kyle McCord, not the problem. Honestly, Ohio State probably would have done better the last 2 games they played if they had Kyle McCord.
Yeah, I would think so. They've got a lot of talent this year. Do they have the same offensive coordinator, or was Kyle McCord just kind of the scapegoat?
So they got a new offensive coordinator because they hired Bill O'Brien. Then he got the Boston College job. So then they went and hired Chip Kelly.
Gotcha. Okay. So again, TBD on Ohio State. They haven't showed us anything, but Kyle McCord.
Oh, dude, they put up 56 points yesterday and kept their starters in until the beginning of the 4th quarter.
Oh, so they pulled no miss.
Yeah.
But Kyle McCord looked like good, like better than he ever did last year. You can tell he's grown a lot, but you can also just tell the talent is there. Like Syracuse got the steal of the century, and it looks like they're going to get a good bit from him.
Yeah, no, before we were talking about Georgia Tech maybe a dark horse to contend for the ACC. If that's how Syracuse looks against the team that was leading the ACC, is Syracuse a dark horse for the ACC?
Could be. I mean, the ACC is pretty wide open past Miami. I mean, Miami seems like they're going to be good enough to lock in one of the spots, but the rest of the race seems wide open. Clemson, Syracuse, Virginia's undefeated still. They haven't really played anybody though.
I was about to say Virginia started their season with Richmond and then played another FCS school.
Yeah. I've got some friends who work at the University of Virginia, so I just wanted to mention their name. But yeah, we'll see. But I mean, again, there's no team is off the table in the ACC right now except Florida State.
It's so much fun to say after what they did last year.
I know they. I hope they have the season they deserve, as I will continue to say. So far, they have.
Uh, Team looking like they may get the season that they do not deserve. Utah scored 23 points in the first half before Cam Rising went out with a throwing hand injury, and it happened in the worst way. It's not like he was throwing a pass and like hit his hand on a helmet. He ran out of bounds, and Baylor had a folding table set up with Gatorade on it that when he was pushed out of bounds, his hand hit the table.
Man, the rotten luck Cam Rising has had
for
in his
someone that
career.
Everyone in America loves.
Yeah,
he cannot catch a break.
That's just a shame. I hope he gets to go on to the NFL and there are no folding tables in sight.
I hope he comes back, because if Cam Rising doesn't come back this year, Utah's playoff hopes are as good as gone. Utah scored 0 points against the Baylor team projected finish bottom 3 in the Big 12 after Cam Rising went out.
Yeah. Hope he can come back. Because the Utah team is good, but they need that guy at quarterback. And again, just the rotten luck, man. Get well soon, Cam. That just made me sad. I didn't see that until just now.
Cam, if you're listening, which I hope you are because we love you, you should hit up Michael Penix and see how to throw left-handed.
There we go.
You just be an ambidextrous quarterback, never have to come off the field.
Yeah.
And the last thing that I have in my notes here, I just wish the Duke's Mayo kickoff game had gone somewhat competitive. It would give us more to talk about. Because Tennessee just beat the hell out of NC State due to NC State's lack of a quarterback. We talked about it. Grayson McCall needed to be his 2020 self.
Yeah.
And maybe he's like Samson. Mullet left, so did his power. Who knows? But Tennessee's dangerous. They've only played Chattanooga and an inflatedly ranked NC State team. But, I mean, they look good. Nico did have at least one interception, but when you're playing a ranked team, and like I said,
and you're a young kid,
was inflated. When you're playing a ranked team and you're getting your second string guys in at the end of the game, you've had a damn good game.
Yeah, there's no doubt. The only note I really had on this is if you are a head coach at this point, what reason do you have if you're taking a quarterback in the transfer portal to get somebody who would be on his last year of eligibility with you? Like, it seems like at the most generous I can be, a lot of these guys just do not have the time to get in there and mold into the system that these teams are running to actually produce something on the field. And Cam Ward is phenomenal with Miami right now, year one, at least looks that way. But he's really the only guy I can think of in recent times that has used 1 year of eligibility at a place and just immediately floated in and started having success. Even Joe Burrow was in his second year when he had that crazy run for the national championship.
I think a lot of coaches are desperate because they feel like they're a quarterback away. And then they turn that desperation into confidence in their offensive coordinator to change the scheme to fit what the quarterback is good at. But, when you're saying, hey, Mr. Offensive Coordinator, I know you're almost 60 and you've been doing things the same way for 20 years, but I need you to completely redo your entire scheme because we got this new player. That's too much.
Yeah. You are better off finding a scheme fit and molding it. And I know not everybody can have the fortune that Georgia has of just bringing guys in who seem to just be willing to wait it out year after year, and each guy looks as good as the last was at that point in time coming in. I know not everybody has that luxury, But that seems to be the recipe. Certainly more than grabbing one guy who has a year left and trying to make one big last season before he goes to the NFL.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I did want to also bring up the game between Kentucky and South Carolina. I know it's Kentucky week, so we'll be talking about it a lot more. But I just wanted to throw out there, I don't think you can look at this game and say this is indicative of how these seasons are going to go. Because both of these teams are using really inexperienced players, a lot of them their first year in those systems. And when that happens, there are going to be games where your young player's talent really shines and takes over for you. And there are going to be games where that doesn't happen and they're kind of unprepared for what happens as a result of that. And it seems in this case, South Carolina got the luck of the draw in this game. Their young players had a really, really great game. Kentucky's did not. And that's just what happens when you've got a bunch of young players out there learning your offense while they're on the field playing and learning your defense while they're on the field playing. So I'm not saying it's a total fluke. South Carolina may, in fact, be a lot better than we thought they were going to be. But I'm not ready to write off Kentucky at all. I know what they've got talent-wise, especially in Brock Vandagriff, but nobody's going to get out there right away when they've never started a game before and they just had to start learning a new offense and light up the scoreboard every single week.
And the first the first start of your career gets called in the third quarter due to weather.
Yeah, that didn't help. And he looked good in that game. But again, sometimes a player like that is going to look great, and sometimes the player is going to take a step back. I bring up 2006 Stafford a lot in this episode, apparently. But there were games where he looked like he was ready to go to the NFL right now, and there were games where he threw 4 interceptions that season, and we were all wondering why he was still out there on the field. Put that Joe Cox guy in, he might have something special. So again, let's just if you're writing off Kentucky right now, I think you're making a mistake. I think they could still have a pretty good run this year, especially if they can take this and learn from it.
No, I agree. And South Carolina's front seven didn't give Brock an opportunity to breathe or blink or even go with his instincts once he got the ball. That Dylan Stewart kid, I said it last week, he looks like an early Jadeveon Clowney. If that dude puts some weight on and, learns other facets of being a defensive end, I'm going to be honest, I'm real glad Georgia doesn't play South Carolina this year or next. Because that kid
again,
is
that pop, yeah, he's going to make a lot of money one day, and I will cheer on when he does and be thankful that he's not lined up on the other side of a first-time starting Gunnar Stockton next year, because there's a very good chance that would go the same way.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nothing Finer podcast. Coming up, I am supposed to be talking with Cash Daniel again for the Kentucky game. That episode will come out probably Wednesday. And then, as we've been doing Thursday or Friday, we will come out with our picks and breakdown of the rest of the games for the week. But if you're in the Savannah area, or if you're not, come hang out with us at Barrel House. We were supposed to be there this weekend for the Kentucky game. It's a night game, so it'll be even more rowdy than that noon game against Clemson. We're talking about doing a bunch of different giveaways. Rock 1061 maybe giving away some tickets to a show coming up soon. We're trying to do some cool stuff out there. Follow us on social media. Check out Rock 1061 on Fridays around 4 if you want to hear me talk more shit. And as always, remember, there is nothing finer in the land
than a drunk, obnoxious Georgia fan.